Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Monday, June 24th, 2024 regular meeting of the Monroe Local Schools Board of Education. Mrs. Moore, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter?
Present.
Mrs. Hagedorn?
Present.
Mr. Grant?
Here.
Mr. Leeds?
Here.
Mr. Fulham?
Here.
Would everyone please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 1.3, approval of the agenda. May I have a motion?
So moved. Oh. Second.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds. Thank you, Mrs. Hagedorn. Mrs. Moore, please call the roll.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn?
Aye.
Mr. Fulham?
Aye.
Mr. Grant?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye, motion carried. Section 2, board committee updates. 2.1, legislative.
There's not much going on in the state except a fight between the Stevens and the rest of the Republicans because Republicans will not let him have any of their funding for reelection purposes. They had a federal judge stop it. So because the Democratic, they said the Democrats put him in, let the Democrats take care of him, basically. So they stopped the funding for him. But anyway, according to Representative Hall, they're going over the budget, and one of the things that he's trying to make sure of is that the OFCC still maintains a $600 million budget to take care of the K-12 change, the buildings that are going on in the K-12 in the state. So he said that'll be Wednesday. They'll lock that up. So other than that, there's nothing on the docket that affects us.
All right. Item 2.2, Butler Tech.
Mr. Guido is in Knoxville,
All right.
so he's not.
Should we
gonna
phone
be-
him?
We can phone him.
All right, we won't phone him. We'll leave him alone. All right, we'll skip that. I'm sure he'll get us in July. All right, item 2.3, finance.
This is not our scheduled month to meet. We'll be meeting here shortly.
All right. 2.4, student achievement.
So for student achievement, it's the summer months, so we really don't have that much to report. I would like to recognize that there's lots of activities going on in this summer. Students preparing for the fall sports. There's football, volleyball, and basketball is having workouts this summer. And I know personally that the Guard is meeting twice a week for the marching band season, and they're doing a fabulous job, and this season's going to be amazing. That's all we have.
I'm sure it's pretty hot out there.
It's very hot outside.
Stay hydrated.
We're staying hydrated and eating lots of popsicles.
All right. Section 3, 3.1, MEA.
Not here.
No one? All right. Moving along then, 3.2, state qualifier recognition.
Mr. Silverman?
Good evening, and I want to thank the board for the opportunity to recognize a really special now alumni, Andrew Wilcox. So I was trying to think earlier today how many times we've recognized Andrew, and I lost count. So
Just a
between
few.
cross country, indoor,
This year.
outdoor, what's that?
Just a few.
Yeah, I mean, he has had one of the most remarkable running careers in our school's history. And he really, in the spring and the outdoor season this year, he peaked at the right time, and he had a phenomenal postseason. A great league meet, went into the district meet up at Bellbrook, completely just blew away the competition. I mean, Mr. Prohaska and I were there. I remember him like in awe as he's coming around, like, how did he hit that next gear on the finish? Then went on to the regional meet, finished first the regionals, regional champion, and then on to the Division I OHSA state meet, and then was a qualifier for the nationals out in Pennsylvania. But I'm really excited. I'm going to let his, I always say it, so I'm going to do it one more last time, his mom and his coach talk a little bit about his postseason and the year he's had. And thank you again for the opportunity to recognize Andrew. So, Coach Wilcox?
All right. Thank you. Well, if you ask any runner, they do things for a variety of reasons, and rarely is it for the recognition, but it doesn't mean it doesn't go unnoticed and appreciated when something extraordinary happens, and Andrew gets to be here tonight. So thank you for celebrating his success with us. And special thanks to AJ and his friend Ben for incredible pictures. If you haven't had a chance to see the video compilation, check out Hornets in Game on X. It's amazing. Like, I can't thank you enough. That is so cool. Shared it with everyone I know. The good and the bad, I have nothing really planned to say because every time I tried to think about it, it was pretty overwhelming to come up with how to summarize even just this season. So I'm going to assume everybody in this room is here because you either have children or grandchildren or involved in appreciate what the students in this district are doing. So you know all the sentiments and the pride that I'm feeling for what Andrew's done. I'm just going to kind of give you some of his stats, but be aware he's also done all of this with a part-time job, a 5.15 GPA, and he's going to the University of Dayton in the fall as a junior because he's earned his associate's degree. So to use the cliche line, he's using his academic and athletic talents and has earned a full ride to the University of Dayton. So that said, some of his stats and achievements include, these I did actually write down. The 800 meter, a 1 minute 59 second. 1600 was a 420. The mile was a 424. The 3200 was a 906. The 2 mile, a 918, and the 5K was a blazing 1438. So that said, every single one of those records is a school record, and every meet except the one, unfortunately at the state meet, was a PR for Andrew this season. So 9 consecutive races of PRs, and that kind of goes without saying as pretty remarkable in and of itself. I know Q was upset with the end of her season at swim because she didn't PR, and Andrew's statement was, a PR is asking your body to do something it's never done before, and you can't expect that every time. I hoped it wasn't foreshadowing, and clearly it was the exact opposite, so he had mentally prepared himself for being able to do that. What do those numbers mean? I don't know if you guys remember the last time we were here and I said the only person in the room that thinks 922 isn't fast is Andrew, and he blew that one away with the 906. The 1438 stands as third in the nation and number 3 all-time in the state of Ohio for a high school athlete. So just to put those numbers in perspective, it's pretty cool. He used to hear, I can't run 1 mile in the time it takes you to do 2. He's now heard several times, I can't bike a 5K in the time it took you to run a 5K. So I guess that just amped it up again. As Mr. Silverman mentioned, he won the league, the Division I, regional, and districts. State meet was a little bit disappointing, but he was able to bounce back from that and earn the trip to the national meet. It was one of the most incredible experiences that he's ever had. I know going into it, I didn't really understand how important it was. I didn't understand how historic Franklin Field was for runners and what it meant to them. But being in there and watching it happen and seeing all those teams come together, if you do watch that video at the end, the sportsmanship was unbelievable. Andrew crossed the line in third after having led for several laps. First thing he did was pat the winner on the back and shake the hand of the second place guy. So it's more about the competition and the sportsmanship, the selfless acts, and everyone there was excited. It earned him and the top 6 finishers All-American status, which was also pretty cool. We talk a lot in cross country and track about goals, and maybe Andrew bought in early because he did first tee golf and had a really great AAU basketball coach, so he understood it. The other kids, a lot of them roll their eyes at me. I hope things like this drive them to go forward and do better, because New Balance, I'm sure it was a goal somewhere in the back of his mind, but it wasn't something ever stated out loud. So it was the goals that led to a dream, and his hard work is what got him there. I'm so proud of everything he's done to get to that point. And even more importantly, at the end of the state meet, which was the worst race he's had in a couple of years, the Dayton coach talked to him and said, you know, are you disappointed? And he said, how can I be upset? The goal was to get here. I'm here, and look at all the people supporting me, and a lot of you are in the room today. And that says more about his character than anything else he's done. And when Mr. Prohaska talked to him, Andrew said it was really cool to be among the big guys out here wearing a Hornets jersey. So I'm as much proud of Andrew for everything he's done off the track as on the track, but I'm so excited for what's next in everything. And to quote two of the best people that he has as mentors, one is, "That's great, what's next?" He's not going to rest on a 14:38 and a 9:06, so expect to see bigger numbers out of this. And the other is Coach Fielder, be happy, not satisfied. So, and finally, I would like to thank Coach Darrell, because about 6 years ago to the day of the national meet was his very first ever cross-country practice, and Seth Darrell saw something in him and inspired him to become the person he is today for running. So thanks for the opportunity to be here, and I think I covered it all.
Yeah, awesome.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
I just want to say, one, I need a glass of water just listening to the times that he's running. But two, to echo what Coach Wilcox said, and that was one thing after the state meet. First of all, what an awesome experience to see one of our athletes competing at Division I, the highest level. But what echoes Andrew's character was that comment that Coach said he made, and he said that was, you know, it was really cool to just see a Hornet jersey out here with the St. X's and the Molars and competing at the highest level on the highest stage in that last weekend. And that meant a lot to me as an AD, because we had a great kid who's a phenomenal young man, a phenomenal student. But at the end of the day, when he could be disappointed, he was really excited about being able to represent our school and our community and his classmates on the highest level. And that says a lot about Andrew's character, and that's why he's going to do phenomenal at UD. So, Andrew, we're going to miss you, buddy, but we're really proud of you, and we're really excited to watch what's next. So, okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's get a photo.
We got to get one last photo for you. Even though you're
Use the other 8.
Cool. Great. Thank you.
Yeah, come back. Yeah. First one post.
Andrew, we expect you here at the next board meeting.
All right, I will. Tim wants to raise you.
Oh my gosh. Dude, I was just running with Greta. No, I'll take a pass on that one.
No.
Hard pass. All right. Item 3.3, comments from the public. Seeing none, we will move on to 3.4, facility financing presentation.
All right. As you know, we talked about at the last board meeting, and even prior, that we are, you know, the bond issue will be on the November ballot, and we've finalized some things, and you'll be approving that language later in the agenda. But tonight we have Mr. Andrew Broussard, who is going to talk about the financing of this bond issue and how beneficial it's going to be to this community. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Thanks, Andy.
Good evening. Is this on? I guess it is.
Yes.
Good evening. Andy Broussard with Bradley Penn Advisors. We are the municipal advisor to the school district. I've personally been involved with the schools going way back to the split, working on the first bond issue with the district. So live right down the street across, I guess you could say, across the border in Liberty Township. So know the area well and been working with the team for quite some time. Do you have control of that? Is it? Gotcha. Okay. So we're going to start off table of contents. We're going to just give you a quick market update, where things stand. Always like to give you a feel for where the market's where it's at. And then going into our discussion about the financing plan, we're going to talk just quickly about the outstanding bonds, because our financing plan for the new issue evolves around the current debt that's outstanding. And then walk through the ballot millage calculation and how that works, and how we get to the millage that will be seen on the bond levy requests in November. So I'm going to give you the market update first. Moving on to the first page here. You may have seen this chart. We've got 3 charts for you to show you where the market's at and just keep you up to date. And as we go through this process, we'll highlight the market, give you some feel where it's been at, where it's heading. This is what we call sort of the spot market rate of a 20-year issue. They collect a certain number of bonds across the country, and every day they calculate the value of it and what the interest rate is. What you see there is going back to 1990, 2000 it is. And the rates, as you can see, have been as high as 6% going back to 2000. And then as we go across the timeline, they've been jumping around there to the far right of the screen. And really, you see that with all the discussion about interest rates, we've sort of hit a ceiling. And most recently, in the last month and a half, rates have started to trickle back down again. And so all this is being driven by the news with inflation and the Fed trying to get that issue under control within the market. And so this next slide really the next 2 slides give you a good feel for what's happening with inflation, because when inflation comes around, they're raising the short-term rates, and we get what we call an inverted yield curve. And so that's what you see there with this representation. The green bar there or the green line going across is going from a 1-year bond maturity all the way to a 30th year rate. And so each year has its own separate interest rate. And you can see there in the front of the curve, it's inverted, it's higher than it should be, instead of normal sloping, which is what the average is showing you there in the orange color. That's the average going back to 1991. The gray bars is the high and the low that it's been. So really, I like this chart because it shows you that on the complete curve, which you'd issue your bonds across, we are really in a period of time that it's not the worst, even though we hear a lot about that. We're right in the middle, or right below the average of where it's been going back to the early 1991 timeframe. So this will change. It changes probably what we've seen really in the marketplace. The volatility has been pretty impressive, and we could see anywhere from 15 to 20 basis point moves in interest rates in a day. What's happened since this chart came out June 1st is we actually have come lower because of some of the inflationary or non-inflationary news we got over the last couple of weeks. So that's good news, and as it continues to get in check, hopefully, those interest rates will come down. This last chart I want to share with you is a pretty ugly chart. You can't really see the very bottom of it, but this goes back to 2000. And this is the 1-year interest rate borrowing costs. And it's the MIG index, which is the highest, or the best interest rate you can issue when you're issuing a 1-year note. You can see really, at this point in time on slide 8. And this impacts sort of our strategy that we've laid out and been discussing for quite some time relative to this possible new issue on the ballot. This is your outstanding voted bonds. The last maturity on that is coming up in 2029. There's several bonds out there. This was all part of the original issue when you broke away from Middletown, but we're finally starting to see the end of that. 06 and 16 and 17 were all different refinancings for savings opportunities that the district took advantage of to try to lower the cost and lower the millage impact to voters. The other impact, and just to highlight for you again, is that your credit ratings all go into this as well when you do finally get to the market. And so this chart just gives you a quick reminder that your credit ratings, and we'll have to go through this process again once you go to issue the bonds. But the AA category from S&P and the A1 on Moody's represent 2 different bonds you have outstanding, but these are still very good indicators and bond ratings that investors look at when they decide whether or not they're going to invest in your bonds, and the underwriter that's going to be selected goes to price your issue. Hopefully we can improve upon that, but there's a lot of factors that go into this, not only financial management that you've done a great job of, but also demographic, size, those types of things all go into impacts. And we'll get into that more later, but as you can see there, very good ratings for the district, and they've improved over time. The next slide, this shows you where your bond millage has been for your outstanding debt. And so the debt service that is due each year equates into a millage given the valuation of the district. And so you can see you can't see the year, but the first column to the left is 2024 at 4.5 mils. The next one's 4.8, and this is really just forecasting out your millage till that 2029 date. Now, even though that you see these numbers in the fours, the auditor's office is only collecting 3.5 right now because there's extra revenue in the bond retirement fund, and so the district's utilizing some of that cash to offset the impact to the taxpayers. So again, I wanted to highlight this because you should be noted for that, the fact that these really should be calculating higher rates for you, but you're at a much lower rate where you're at today in terms of what's being collected. So that's the other portion that goes into our calculation when we get to this in a couple pages is your valuation. And so the valuation, as we all know, went up significantly last year, and as you can see, you've seen good growth going forward from the past. So as we get to the ballot calculation on page 13, we've talked a little bit about this already, but these are the inputs that go into the calculation. And this is a set calculation that is the county auditor has to follow when they go to give you your millage estimate for the ballot purposes. Assessed valuation, increases or decreases in that over time will impact, obviously, the millage that will be calculated. Interest rates, again, as we've seen higher interest rates in the past, we want to be conservative because what we place on the ballot is something that you can manage towards once we get to that issue. You can imagine some of the districts that passed a year and a half, 2 years ago, got caught in a rising interest rate environment, and so therefore sometimes in that case the millage for them it was higher than what was on the ballot. But we're going to talk about the interest rate we use because we want to make sure we're using a conservative number. Also, the other impact that goes into this calculation is the length of the borrowing. The longer the term of your borrowing for the calculation will decrease that millage amount. You could go shorter, but that's going to increase the millage to folks when you're looking at what's going to be passed on to the voters when it gets collected. So our strategy revolves around passing the ballot millage now, but not collecting until later on. And with the bonds maturing in 2029, we have the flexibility, and actually the financial management of the district has been done in such a great way that you guys have the ability to offset these payments to the taxpayers until later on. And so what they're going to see when they go to the ballot is 3.5 mils, actually a little bit less than that, but 3.5 mils is what we're managing around with the other bonds that are outstanding right now, so that we never increase over time what they're paying currently. So they call this a sort of a millage drop scenario because if you would not do anything, in essence, and last bond payment gets made, the millage goes away completely. Last point on this page is that we have been working with administration to look at some of the other revenues that will offset during that time period, and we think that given some of the other estimates and the money you're seeing come in off of other TIF projects, your general fund balance, things of that nature, to utilize cash to make the payments, so there's not a tax increase to the residents. Next slide gives you an illustration of how we and the county auditor comes up with a calculation for purposes of placing this on the ballot. I'll just walk you through some of the major inputs that we talked about already, and you can see them there. The 2023 tax valuation came in at $547 million. The interest rate we're using is 5%. And so you saw earlier the interest rates are coming down lower. We feel this is a conservative number to make sure we're safe and gives us the ability to manage that 3.5 mils. And then the term is 38 years. we plug in the dollar amount we're going to utilize in terms of what you need for your construction project at $36,750,000. And you can see in terms of the calculation there of first interest payment, principal assumption, we come up to a calculation of 3.49 mils, which will be placed on the ballot in November. Any questions on how we get there relative to the calculation? Same exact calculation the county auditor uses on both sides.
I just want to reiterate for anybody listening or watching that it's not, as if it passes in November, it's not that we are deferring payments on it. It's that the district will be able to, with other funds, cover that so it is not passed on to the taxpayers. And because of what the district has done financially, they're able to cover that for that period of time, which is a short period of time. Beyond that, it would start cutting into our general fund balance, and at some point we would need to go for a operating levy. So that's why we can't sustain that over a long period of time, but we can cover that for that period of time so we are not passing on an increase to the community. Did I say that correctly?
You did, that's right. Next slide gives you an illustration of what this looks like. And I try to pick good colors for you to see up on the screen, but I'm not the best with colors. So we're going to call that blue to the far left. When you look at on the sheets you have in front of me, it starts off just for the folks at home. 2023, again, that was at 4 mils. We dropped down to 3.5, and we've been told that we're going to be staying there with both county auditors. So as we go across until 2029, that last payment, then the new bonds kick in and continue to move along in terms of it'll decrease over time with new valuation coming online and new development that happens, and so it'll continue to get rolled back. But we don't like to factor large growth rates, and so we do take a conservative approach with that. And obviously what you're going to see here is not going to be what happens over time, because it's just so hard to forecast out what the values are. So again, the comment that was made earlier, what we're looking at is really, 24, actually, not 24, but 25 on, because 24 year end, 25 was when the bonds will probably be issued, and then we'll start making payments, and depending on when the bonds are issued, June or December of that year. So 25, 26, 27, 28, 29 will be paid for out of district resources. This, I just want to also mention, this strategy is really, it's not unique. It's been utilized before. Kings just passed it in the last election. Sycamore Schools has done this before. Southwest Harrison area has done that. I could go on and on and on. There's a lot of places who have utilized this strategy to try to mitigate, bring you what you need in terms of facilities, but mitigate the tax impact to the community. We don't have to look at the disclaimer pages that we have to put in there. Any questions on any of the previous pages, the inputs?
Andy, the only question I have is, in the last bond issue we had for this site, we offered it to the public to
Yes.
buy bonds.
Yeah.
Will that be offered this time or not?
Yeah. In fact, it's amazing what happens with technology over, I don't know how many years it's been, but there's a lot of ways that we can get that to the public. I do recall us doing that. Whoever the underwriter is that will be selected with this project, they do have better capabilities of getting local input, interest, and actually offering those bonds directly. And in fact, there's ways for us to write certain agreements with the underwriter that states, Ohio Retail has first right of refusal. So is anybody willing to match their interest rates that are set that day, they can invest in the bonds and like they did last time.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Anybody else have any questions?
No?
I want to thank Mr. Broussard through this whole process. He's worked with Mrs. Moore and I over the last couple of years. I think the last time I called, he's like, I've done so many different scenarios, but we really were trying to be conscious not to get an increase to the community, especially after that last property value increase. I also want to thank Brenda Weimer, who is our bond counsel, who she has been great working with Amy, and we were on a time crunch, and she turned it around very quickly for us. So we really appreciate that as well. So again, this is, for the bond issue this coming November, and it's to address the overcapacity in our buildings. I've shared it many, many times. We're at about 130% capacity in this main campus and using the primary building, and this will address our overcapacity issues and also be very responsible, I think, with asking money for the community, so.
Yep.
All right.
All right.
Thank you, guys. We
Thank
appreciate
you
it.
very much. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
All right, moving on. Item 3.5, Superintendent's Update.
All right. I just have a few things. I did want to mention that later in the agenda, we've got school fees on the agenda, and that is something that Mrs. Moore and I have been looking at, and I think we're going to really dig into them this year and try to simplify them for parents and hopefully do some reductions in some school fees where, especially at the secondary level, they tend to get very high for kids that are in a lot of extra electives. And so we're going to try to look at it, make it a little more standardized. So one, it's easier to collect from the parents, and it's a little bit more affordable. And we'll also, I just wanted to reiterate again with the athletic fees. Last year, the board, we decided to give a break with the larger increase in property tax coming in. We gave a complete break for 1 year, which missed fall. And so this fall coming in, there will be no athletic fees moving forward. When we get closer to the time, we'll have to make a decision. Do we reinstate them or do we continue as is? So I'll have a recommendation for you prior to, much prior to that. So we are working on staffing. Every time Mr. Catanzaro comes up and he's like, I've got every position filled. Yep, we got one other resignation. It's just that time of year. So we've got a couple out there still, but he's working hard along with the building principals to make sure we get all of that filled. Cleaning in the buildings is well underway. Our new custodial supervisor has been a huge help, and I think they're actually ahead of schedule, which is great. So obviously a lot of capital improvements as you drove in and you saw the replacement of the roof is well underway, the flat roof. So that's a great project, as well as a lot of the others. Along with the bond issue, the newsletter went out to all families and staff members electronically at the end of last week. The paper copy that will go to the entire community will be mailed out probably later this week. I should know the exact date there. We'll reach out to the Journal to get an article out there, as well as hit social media. We want to make sure everybody knows our plan. And then, as I've shared before in fall, what Mr. Broussard shared is, I think it's clear cut, but it's going to be a lot of educating the community to make sure they understand what we're doing. We also met with the both county auditors, Warren and Butler, because our district straddles the border. Even though most of our district is in Butler County, we do have a portion in Warren County. So we met with them and shared our plan just to make sure they were aware of everything going on. If community were to call them and say, are they telling the truth? Are they really not passing on? Is it not going to be an increase? And they were on board, and I think they approved the plan, and so they're well aware of everything that is going on. The last thing that I wanted to share with, there was an article in the News Journal last week about, Tom, you talked about not a lot going on in Columbus, but, last year, or the last round of budgets, they increased the vouchers for private schools a huge amount, which, I'm all for school choice, but, they're selling that as it is to give kids a choice and an opportunity to go anywhere they want. Well, voucher usage increased in the state of Ohio 313%, but the enrollment at those private schools that accept vouchers only increased 3%. So what that is that the students that were, and families that were already in the private schools that are are just now being reimbursed. So it really has not changed the landscape at all. So, that is a lot of taxpayer money being funneled away from public schools to private schools. So I thought that was a very interesting article, so.
There's a new thing also of testing. They want to know, okay, you're going to a private school, other than the Catholic schools, but you're going to a voucher school, what are you doing grade-wise compared to a public school? And if they would use the public schools such as Monroe instead of using the public schools such as Cincinnati, then they would find out that the kids are not getting, they're getting a Cincinnati education versus a Monroe education.
Yeah.
So,
We are pretty fortunate that we have a great community and a great school district, and we do not lose a lot of kids to
Right.
Private schools. And again, that's parent choice, and I'm all for that. But it is affecting some of the other districts pretty hard. So.
the poorer districts mainly.
Yep. Yep. All right, that's all I have.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Buskirk. Moving along to Section 4, Treasurer's Business, Item 4.1.
I request that we block 4.1 to 4.4.
So 4.1 to 4.4. May I get a motion to block items 4.1 to 4.4?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Grant.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Fulham. Mrs. Moore, please call the roll to block items 4.1 to 4.4.
All right, Mr. Grant,
Aye.
Mr. Fulham,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter.
Aye, motion carried. Somebody to do a
I will-
motion to approve the items, yes?
Yes, I'll read off the items.
Okay, let's
and
do
then
that.
I'll see if you have questions. I recommend the approval of the minutes from the work session on June 4th, 2024. I also have the approval of the treasurer's financial report for May. That I don't have any major comments on. It is aligned with the May forecast update, so you'll see that the variance as compared to the update is a lot smaller than it had been in previous reports. We still expect to finish the year at about $40.2 million in the general fund. We did receive our final in lieu of tax payments from the city of Monroe in May, so things are coming to an end and coming closer to close out the year. Otherwise, in the office, we've been working diligently to close out the year. The bond fund report, would you like to ask me?
Yeah, is all the money where it's supposed to be?
It is.
Thank you.
Good work.
And I do have an advance request for year-end to cover a negative balance within a classroom fees special cost center for the high school. This is typical when you have fee reductions for reduced and free lunches. Typically, you will end up with a negative at the end of the year. We will return that advance in July, but again, as Mr. Buskirk said, that's a conversation we want to have about the future of those fees and what that might look like. So that's something we'll look at next year.
Okay.
That covers 4.4.
All right. May I get a motion to approve the items as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Grant.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Fulham. Any questions?
Mr. Grant?
Aye.
Mr. Fulham?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye, motion carried. Item 4.5.
I recommend approval of the final appropriations for fiscal year 2024.
May I get a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Grant. Questions, comments?
Nope.
My only comment is that this will close out the year, and I also attached a certificate of estimated resources amendment that will be filed with the county along with this resolution.
Excellent.
Can you hear her?
All right. Mrs. Moore, please call the roll.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mr. Grant?
Aye.
Mr. Fulham?
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye, motion carried. Item 4.6.
Owen's out. Closer. 4.6, I recommend the approval of the temporary appropriations for fiscal year 2025.
May I get a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Grant. Thank you, Mr. Fulham. Any questions?
My comments here, these are the temporary appropriations. There will be changes. We have to approve the permanent appropriations by October 1st. And as with staffing changes and quote changes and SRO changes and everything, we constantly get new information every day. So this will get us started for the year, but it's definitely in the ballpark.
With that, Mrs. Moore, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Grant?
Aye.
Mr. Fulham?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye, motion carried. Item 4.7.
I recommend to approve the classroom course and parking fees for the 24-25 school year. As you can see, there are quite a few,
It's a lengthy list we have there.
quite detailed.
May I get a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Hagedorn.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds. Any questions or comments?
Nope.
Mrs. Moore, please call the roll.
Mrs. Hagedorn?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mr. Fulham?
Aye.
Mr. Grant?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye, motion carried. Item 4.8.
I recommend approval of the resolution determining to proceed with bond issue and tax levy in excess of the 10 mil limitation.
May I get a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds.
Second.
Dave can have it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Grant.
My comments is I also would like to thank Mr. Brossart and Mrs. Weimer for being here to educate us on this process, and we have been working with them closely to come up with this plan. And basically, under the CFAP program, the state support coming in at over $25 million has allowed us to reduce the need to borrow on our end, which is fantastic because that gave us the unique opportunity to approach it with this plan to minimize the impact to the taxpayers and try to keep it in line with the current bond millage.
Exactly.
Any questions?
Very good job.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
good. Yeah, thank you for all your help. And thank you guys.
Yeah, I know there's been a ton of work, and I've, being newer, one of the newer members on the board, this is new to all of us at some level, but I've spent a lot of time thinking and listening and talking to folks, and having a plan like this makes a ton of sense to me, and I'm really optimistic about what this could do for the community, so good job, everybody.
With that, Mrs. Moore, please call the roll.
Oh, sorry. Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mr. Grant?
Aye.
Mr. Fulham?
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye. Motion carried. Thank you, Mrs. Moore. Section 5, Superintendent's Personnel Business.
I recommend to block sections 5.1 through 5.4.
May I get a motion to approve blocking items 5.1 to 5.4?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Grant.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Hagedorn. Mrs. Moore, please call the roll to block items 5.1 to 5.4.
Mr. Grant?
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn?
Aye.
Mr. Fulham?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye, motion carried.
All right, the first section is just the approval of a few resignations, and then already some additional positions for the extracurriculars, supplementals. And then 5.3 is a number of new staff members who I know we have a few that have been patiently waiting and learning all about bonds and all that kind of fun stuff. And then 5.4 is some staff extra work there. Any questions? No? Okay.
All right. May I get a motion to approve the items as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Hagedorn.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Fulham.
Ooh, thanks.
I saw you down there being selfless. I got you, buddy. All right. Any
inside
questions or comments? With none, Mrs. Moore, please call the roll.
Mrs. Hagedorn?
Aye.
Mr. Fulham?
Aye.
Mr. Grant?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye, motion carried. And we're,
All right.
Oh,
Any
yeah.
new staff members? Mr. Carpenter, if you want to come on up.
I know. It's so annoying. Want the girl one? Pin 'em.
congratulations. Congratulations. Welcome aboard. Congratulations.
Dive in for a picture if you would. Yeah.
Yeah. You four, come on, you guys. Yeah.
Okay, in 3, 2, 1. Perfect. Thank you.
And come back to the board meeting.
They're always this long and exciting.
We did
Oh,
lots
yeah,
of
there
good,
was cookies.
we did lots of good.
And cookies.
Yeah, take a cookie on your way out.
All right.
Yeah, you guys are free to go.
You're
if
free,
you want to.
it's up to you.
Contract approval.
All right, Section 6, Superintendent's Other Business, 6.1.
I recommend to block 6.1 through 6.3.
May I get a motion to block items 6.1 to 6.3?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Grant.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Fulham. May I get a,
We have a couple of donations there, which we always greatly appreciate.
Thank you.
A couple early graduates that are juniors that finished all their coursework up, which is pretty amazing. And then the formal approval of all of our 2024 graduates.
excellent.
So I'd like to say congratulations to the juniors graduating early, and then congratulations to the 2024 grads again. Good stuff.
Any
You gotta
questions,
Call the roll
comments?
on the.
None?
Yeah, we didn't call the roll on the,
That's all right, we're gonna,
Oh,
yeah, May, can you call the roll to
to block?
approve the
To do
blocking?
Yes. So Mr. Grant?
aye.
Mr. Fulham?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye, motion carried. Now, may I get a motion to approve the items as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Grant.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Hagedorn. Now, any questions or comments?
Congratulations to the junior graduates. That's very impressive, and to our great class of 2024. We'll sorely miss you guys.
And please
Thank you for
come to
doing that at an
graduation.
appropriate time. I appreciate it.
Well, that just eliminated his high five from around the high.
I'd also like to add those juniors that are graduating, come to graduation next year.
Absolutely.
I know it's a year away, but it's a once-in-a-lifetime experience, totally. I wish you'd come back.
Tom's already got it planned.
Free fireworks.
Yeah.
He's like, what are we talking
He's like,
about?
what are they? Yeah. He's like, what?
From the fireworks. All right, Mrs. Moore, please call the roll.
Mr. Grant.
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn.
Aye.
Mr. Fulham.
Aye.
Mr. Leeds.
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter.
Aye, motion carried.
It's recommended the board approve the following overnight trip.
May I get a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Grant.
Second. Oh,
Thank you, Mrs. Hagedorn.
Missed that one, too.
Any questions?
This is the biannual, is that what it is, every other year, Eric?
is it?
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
I wish them luck to qualifying and then having a fabulous time. All right.
Mr. Grant.
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn.
Aye.
Mr. Fulham.
Abstain.
Mr. Leeds.
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter.
Aye, motion carried. Item 6.5.
I would recommend blocking 6.5 through 6.11.
May I get a motion to approve blocking items 6.5 through 6.11?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Fulham. May I, Mrs. Moore, please call the roll to block items 6.5 to 6.11?
Mr. Leeds.
Aye.
Mr. Fulham.
Aye.
Mr. Grant.
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn.
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter.
Aye, motion carried. May I get a motion to approve the items as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Grant.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Hagedorn. All right, any questions or comments?
Any changes in the contracts from last
These are
year?
just all annual contracts. There is, obviously, there is some increase with them per inflation is.
Yeah.
But nothing out of the ordinary, and it's all spelled out there for you.
Cool.
All right, Mrs. Moore, please call the roll.
Mr. Grant.
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn.
Aye.
Mr. Fulham.
Aye.
Mr. Leeds.
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter.
Aye, motion carried. Item 6.12.
It's recommended the board approve the fiscal year 2025 contract with Sodexo.
May I get a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Fulham.
So that's why we got.
That is why we got cookies. They're so good, though.
They are good.
All right, any questions or comments?
More cookies.
They're over there. No
More.
one took any cookies. They're ridiculous.
Oh, my goodness.
More.
All right. Mrs. Moore, please call the roll.
Mr. Leeds.
Aye.
Mr. Fulham.
Aye.
Mr. Grant.
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn.
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter.
Aye, motion carried. Item 6.13.
I recommend a block 6.13 through 6.17.
May I get a motion to block items 6.13 through 6.17?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Grant.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Fulham. Mrs. Moore, please call the roll to block items 6.13 through 6.17.
Mr. Grant.
Aye.
Mr. Fulham.
Aye.
Mr. Leeds.
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn.
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter.
Aye, motion carried. Now, may I get a motion to approve the items as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds. Thank you, Mr. Grant, for the second. Any questions or comments?
Same thing here. Anything out of the ordinary?
Nope.
Any other questions or comments? All right, Mrs. Moore, please
I did
call.
a quick question.
Okay.
Sorry.
more for Eric probably on the huddle. It says we're getting more cameras, or more equipment, I'm sorry. Is it, what equipment?
So right now, we have a little camera, a focus camera in the gym. These are different than the live stream cameras. So this will add a huddle focus camera out of the stadium, and then also provide what's called a flex camera that is designed for boys and girls soccer that the two teams can share like on the road. So it will mount on the press box. We'll still have the live stream cameras with FHS. This is more for coaching and automatic upload and stats and all that.
Cool. So is that like a VO camera?
What's that?
So is that like a VO camera?
The flex is, yeah, it's similar.
Okay.
And
That'll be really cool to have.
The kids get access to it if they want to build their
Yes.
huddle videos
Yeah,
and stuff like that?
We've had the huddle system, for quite some time. This will automatically upload the film for our outdoor teams right into huddle.
Cool.
So, yeah, it doesn't change any of the accessibility. It will be used by boys and girls basketball, volleyball, boys and girls soccer, football. Wrestling uses it to some extent. So.
Is there any discussion on baseball and softball, or is that just?
It's got capabilities for it, but, the way a lot of it, they're going about game change and stuff like that, so.
Gotcha. Yeah, I would like to maybe see it extended in the future, if not, the near future for the other teams as well, that maybe are less people get a chance to go see them, and I think it could be a cool opportunity to expand it into some of the other facilities, tennis, maybe even bowling. I'd like to explore what that is and see what that cost looks like.
Are you asking about huddle or the live streaming?
In general, probably both. In general, I just feel like there's some. I wasn't sure what all was included. That's why I was curious, because I definitely want to make sure all of our teams have equal opportunity to have that type of. I know how important it is to have highlight reels and such, and if it's something that we're providing to some teams and not all teams, I'd like to see or have a discussion about how we can expand that. That's what I'm asking, I guess. If we are already providing that, then, but I don't know that we are. So, something for future conversations, maybe.
Just to echo on that, I know on the baseball side, a lot of it is they're not looking for gameplay action, so that's probably why it hasn't been.
Mm-hmm.
They are usually sending videos of just them pitching, them catching, them hitting. So that might be the reason why it's not for the college recruiters on that end, on the baseball and softball side. I can only speak on those two just from experience.
My original hope was that, and I talked to Huddle about flex camera being adaptable to other sports. So if we had two of them, for example, baseball, softball, boys and girls soccer, you have one baseball, softball, you get one. Their technology is not there yet.
Okay.
Mainly because of the inconsistent, a soccer field is X length, a baseball field is varies, right? So they're not there yet, but I'd ask them about that. So I see where you're going.
Very cool.
But for the cameras, they are, all the kids get an account. They can create their clips, do whatever. Coaches use it for scouting purposes.
Yeah, nice. I see them all over Twitter and everything, and I just want to make sure our kids have the necessary technology to compete with the other schools. So I just want to make sure we're providing that.
Eric, does that camera do the analytics like the VO or the Trace camera?
Like the stats stuff?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so part of this package is Huddle Assist, which when that uploads, it will do stats if the coaches want to take advantage of it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
And, so it sends the way they stat it, they send it back.
That's pretty
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's slick.
All right. Any other questions or comments? All right. Mrs. Moore, please call the roll.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mr. Grant?
Aye.
Mr. Fulham?
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye. Motion carried. Item 6.18.
It's recommended to approve the 18-month rate with AEP for natural gas supply.
May I get a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Grant.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Hagedorn.
That's a good savings,
It's actually a great rate.
you know?
When does that go into effect? When does it go into effect? Is it immediately, or is it like?
It's this fall, I don't know exactly.
August 1 is when the,
All right, any other questions?
oh, that's the gas supply, I'm sorry. looking at the wrong one.
Mrs. Moore, please call the roll.
Mr. Grant?
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn? Aye. Mr. Fulham?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye, motion carried. Item 6.19,
It's recommended to approve the renewal of the property and liability coverage for fiscal year 2025.
may I get a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Hagedorn.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds.
As you can see, with all insurance that are going up, it was a very hefty increase, so.
Oof.
Yep.
Wrong
Yeah.
business.
Yeah.
Yeah, no kidding.
Any other questions or comments? No. All right, Mrs. Moore, please call the roll.
Mrs. Hagedorn?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mr. Fulham?
Aye.
Mr. Grant?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye, motion carried. I didn't know Missy was here. All right, item 6.20.
It's recommended to approve the annual pricing agreement, ECI adjustment for fiscal year 2025 with Sodexo. That's the total amount, and then, as you can see, it was a 3.4% cost of living adjustment, which is very reasonable.
Yeah.
We were expecting a little higher, actually.
May I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, thank you, Mr. Grant. Thank you, Mr. Leeds. And this is the Sodexo contract for the custodial maintenance?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. All right, any other questions? Nope. Mrs. Moore, please call the roll.
Mr. Grant?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mr. Fulham?
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye, motion carried. Thank you very much, Mr. Buzzkirk. All right, before we entertain a motion for adjournment, let's go to everyone's favorite, Section 7, comments from the board. That's why we're all here, isn't it? All right, anyway, Mr. Leeds. I'm not
You
gonna
know-
make it all weird this time.
We don't always take the time to thank the staff and the office and everything for everything that they do. The teachers and principals do one fantastic job, but Amy, your group, for year end and everything that has gone on since you took over, excuse me, mid-year, have done a fantastic job. And everything is, right there, so appreciate it. And then the staff and the office secretaries and everything have kept us informed on everything, so great job there. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds. All right, Mr. Fulham,
Mine's gonna be very redundant today, because everybody's got my stuff.
prove it.
I know. All right, high five to Monroe Junior High student Jack Nurnberg, who recently made national headlines as the winner of this year's Daughters of the American Revolution contest. Jack's essay on the patriotic music of famed American composer John Philip Sousa was selected from dozens of quality entries as the best in America among his grade level peers. Jack was awarded $2,500 and a trip to Washington, D.C. to the group's national convention held this week to read a portion of his essay. High five to the collective team at the board office for all that you have done and continue to do in making our district run smoothly. Know that your contributions are not unnoticed, and I appreciate your hard work. And finally, last one for this kid, because he gets enough of them, but high five to recent graduate Andrew Wilcox, who continues to build an illustrious high school career as he placed third in the recent 5K New Balance Nationals Outdoor Championships in Philadelphia. And best of luck to him as he pursues his academic and athletic career at the University of Dayton. You want me to make one up?
I mean, that wasn't 5.
Well, he already gave one earlier. So
Oh, got it.
was fine.
Okay, all right. I just want to make sure. I didn't want to cheat you. Didn't want to cheat you at all.
he didn't lose a finger.
Okay, that's all we got.
All right, thank you,
Sorry.
Mr. Fulham. Mr. Grant, what you got?
Only thing I want to echo, thank Andy's team, Robert and Amy, in regards to the upcoming levy. I know as a board, it's very important to us to impact our community in the least way possible, and I think with the plan everyone came up with, it does just that. And just a reminder, I mean, we as a district have not asked our community for a lot. I think it was 2013 was the last time that anything was asked, and that was repaid back. So just wanted to just reiterate that in regards to, it's not a secret, we need a building. The plan all along when the school was built, a new building was gonna be built right around 2012, and here we are 2024, and we still don't have a building. So I think it's gonna be a good thing for our community, and it's gonna be beneficial to their pocketbooks in the long run. That's it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Grant. Mrs. Hagedorn?
I would like to ditto everything that Dave Grant just said. I'd like to, thank Amy and Robert and Andy Bressart and with Bradley and Payne, all the hard work that they've done to come up with the plan and the recommendation for the bond issue. It's going to be a very exciting time for our district. I'd like to also congratulate Andrew Wilcox again. That's amazing that he got to compete at the state level. Not many Monroe Hornets get to say that they competed at the state level, so that's very exciting. I'd also like to say congratulations, and you're doing a great job, Mr. Carpenter, as the board president, and keeping us all in line and with all the blocking motions.
Now you get the bag.
Good job.
Yeah.
And that's all that I have.
Thank you, Mrs. Hagedorn. Oh, man, I can't say ditto, because then I'd be like congratulating myself. That'd be super weird.
You could.
I mean, if you
That's
wanted.
true, I could.
You
I've
can
been
have
working
an
on that.
exception in there.
That's true. You know, it's ironic, because I was actually going to thank you during mine.
Okay.
So now it's just weird. But no, I did want to say that I do appreciate all that you've done with putting together the evaluations and everything. I know it's a lot, and I think you've done a really great job, and you've created a process where we didn't really have a great process. So I do really appreciate all the hard work that you've done with that. And I hope everybody has had a great summer so far, and I think we're supposed to get some rain, so my grass won't be brown anymore, so that's exciting. With that, I will take a motion for adjournment at 7:08 p.m.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Grant.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Hagedorn. Any final questions or comments on adjournment? No, you don't get any. All right, Mrs. Moore, please call the roll.
Mr. Grant?
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn?
Aye.
Mr. Fulham?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye, motion carried. Thank you, everyone.
There we go. Give this guy cookies. Guys gonna get a room over there.
Same thing.